this is all going to unfold here shortly. And May 1st is the preliminary hearing. Now, keep in mind, the preliminary hearing is just a perfunctory function of the DA, where all they have to do is present probable cause that a murder was committed and that David committed it. That's all they have to show. And my guess is that, and they're not going to display all their evidence at that. It's not a whole trial that would last 6 weeks. It's just a day hearing. But you've got 40 terabytes of information and you want a speedy trial. This is the rest of your life. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon. So why don't you just put your feet up, get your bologna sandwich, and start singing your prison blues, because this is not going to go well for you.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's going to react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your criminal law expert. Am I an expert? Yes, I am. I'm board certified as a criminal defense lawyer, which means I've tried a lot of cases. I know what I'm doing. I don't just show up and hold your hand and I write a passport to prison. That's not what I do. I'm a criminal defense lawyer through and through, and that's the lens through which I try to look at most of these cases. Today, we're giving you an update on David. So that means I have my pearl handle pistol cufflinks on. I'm coming to you with the injection of our former content genius, Michael Rivers. His spirit is running through my veins. And this case is really messed up. And it gets messed up and more messed up the more we get into this. And we got a lot of news that came out of this, so we're going to get right into it. But before we get to that, our channel, our lovely channel, is sponsored by AskALawyer.com. AskALawyer.com does two things. And I was thinking about this, I bash AI. AI is helpful in some respect, but you can't just use AI. You have to have a living, breathing human being. That's why Ask a Lawyer is the best of both worlds. They have an AI component trained on all the 50 states, but at the same time, you can talk to a living, breathing lawyer. Say, look, this is what I found. Does this make sense? You can get to where you need to go for $49. They're not going to represent you in court, but they do have all the tools you need to get you to where you need to go. So AskALawyer.com. If you are a grandma stuck in your grandson's basement, like mine is, she's probably going to need some help to try to get out of that basement. She should go to AskALawyer.com. If you have a problem with your landlord, if you have a contract dispute, if you sold somebody a car and they didn't pay you or didn't transfer the title or something happened and there's an issue with the contract, you want to sue them? Well, go to AskALawyer.com. They'll help you. Whatever your legal issue is, go to AskALawyer.com. Same people that brought you eForm and eSign, both of which I use on a regular basis. Okay, so let's go to David. Just so we're clear, in the last video, I may have called, we got some comment. People comment about the weirdest things. And if you guys were commenting on me calling Celeste Rivas Hernandez a woman, she was a young woman. She was a child, of course, but she was a young lady. I didn't mean anything by it, okay? And in fact, I think later in the video, I call her a young girl or whatever. She was a girl, okay? Let's just put that to bed. She was a victim of a horrific crime. She was probably a little out of her element. Not probably. She was out of her element completely. She was manipulated and destroyed by a monster. Didn't deserve it. And so if I called her a woman, I meant a young woman, like a young teenage woman, teenage girl. I didn't mean anything by it. So why don't you focus on something else? Okay. Anyway, let's just kind of recap what happened in the last court appearance and see where this goes. I'm a seasoned veteran. I'm almost 30 years in practice as a criminal defense lawyer, okay? I try a lot of cases. I don't do DUIs. I had somebody call me a DUI lawyer, ex-fiance, but I'm not just a DUI. I do like murder cases and, whatever. So let's just talk about this kind of crap, okay? Because when you make statements in court and you don't back them up, you lose credibility. And what do we have as a lawyer but credibility? All we have is our name, right? You don't have anything else. So let's hear what Blair Berk said.
I believe the actual evidence will show David Berk did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, nor was he the cause of her death. And we would like to be able to have the evidence come into the light of day at the earliest opportunity in order.
Okay. When you make bold statements like that, some people like to be bold right out of the block. I'm not that way because you haven't seen one fucking thing that the government has yet, and she's a fine lawyer, really good lawyer. She's really fucking expensive. But she ain't going to try this case. She is not going to be the lawyer at the end of this case. I bet you $25 that she's not going to be the lawyer at the end of this case.
In order to establish that, we're asking for April 23rd as a 3 of 10.
Get the coroner's department, which is now the medical examiner's department.
So now she, the prosecutor, knows all this stuff. You sit back and say, oh, you're more than welcome to have whatever we got, but it's a lot.
To release those materials.
Your Honor, it's surprising news given the District Attorney's Office held a press conference this morning where they discussed the cause of death, apparently under seal and not released by the coroner's office, as did the robbery homicide unit to the press. So
discussing a cause of death or something like that without specifics to the press is one thing. Releasing an entire medical report with a lot more detail is quite another. Anyway, so remember, that's how this started, right? Now, let's take a look at where we're at now. So we got the issue of me calling her a woman out of the way, right? Right? She's a girl. There's no question. And when she met David, she was like 9, and he was grooming her from 9 to 11. I mean, what the fuck? Romantic Homicide. Remember that song? No, thank you. So, and this is a picture of what she looked like. She's just a fucking baby. Just a baby. Just an absolute baby. So the family issued a statement. We would like to thank the Los Angeles Police Department and the District Attorney's Office for their hard work. We would also like to thank the people of Lake Elsinore for all their support. Celeste was a beautiful, strong girl who loved to sing and dance. Every Friday night was movie night, and we spent wonderful times together, the family wrote. We love her very much, and she always told us she loved us. We miss her deeply. All we want is justice for Celeste. Fuck. I just don't, I'll confess a little ignorance because before this case, I had no idea who this guy was. We don't run the same circles. I like John Denver. I like some rap, but it is what it is. So now here's the deal. Now you're in court, right? And the judge is Olmedo, and she is kind of known for high-profile cases. She did the Danny Masterson case, him from that 70s show. Isn't that where he's from? And he wound up getting 30 years to life for putting his where it didn't need to be. You don't see women getting in these sexual cases. You know that? Honestly, it's all fucking stupid, usually stupid white guys. But in this case, we're dealing with a stupid black guy. So she's married to a law enforcement officer. She's kind of pro-prosecution. She's been known to be tough but fair. Here's the thing. I'll take a tough sentencer but a fair trial judge. That gives me an opportunity to beat the case. I remember one time I had a murder case in St. Paul. Ramsey County. It was Judge Flynn. I know really like Judge Flynn. She was just so nice, and she just had such a nice way about her. But if you got the wrong verdict, she's going to screw your client, and she'll do it in a nice, happy voice.
Speaking of nice, Minnesota nice. Some say it's the younger, colder cousin of Southern hospitality.
And she said, before we started the trial, she says to me, oh, Bruce, I thought you'd remove me from this case because she's tough on sentencing. I said, well, Judge, but she's pleasant. She's really, I said, if I got my ass handed to me, at least you'd do it in a nice and pleasant way. And she laughed, but my client was acquitted, so she never got the chance to. But she was fair in her trial. She followed the rules, And she was a good judge, really, really good judge. Now, there's been a lot of reporting on this case. Stephen Fisher is an investigator. He's following this case. Like we're all chasing this case because we want some views and whatever. That's why we do this, I guess, right? Stephen Fisher, this is this guy. He says, the cause and manner of death in Celeste Rivas Hernandez was determined months ago. As stated in her official press release, the cause and manner of death were determined December 9th. The repeated claims by TMZ, now he's dishing on TMZ for some reason, that medical examiner was unable to determine a cause and manner of death due to the condition of her remains were never accurate. They were waiting on toxicology, which they were able to get in her state of decomposition. Now, they convened several grand juries. Why do they do this? Because the grand jury gives them subpoena power. You subpoena information to the grand jury. You can use the grand jury to investigate, not necessarily to indict. I have not been perfect in this case, but I will acknowledge that when I was wrong, TMZ, the other hand, reported the Celeste remains were still partially frozen when they arrived at the medical examiner's office, suggested that David Berk was the only recently arrested because the cause and manner had just been determined, and that information is incorrect. At this point, nearly all the information they have about pointing this case are false or misleading. There's such a rush sometimes to get information, through your channel or whatever, and so people get it wrong. But you get a soundbite right away, and TMZ did the same thing here. Evidently, I don't know that for a fact, and I'm not going to dish on TMZ. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I just think if you're going to be reporting on it, you should probably wear something other than just a T-shirt. Harvey, come on, dress it up a little bit, would you? You're a lawyer. I think you're a lawyer too, aren't you? I'm just joking. That's just a little tongue in cheek. I am glad to see the facts are finally driving the narrative in this case. Celeste died by a stabbed by an object that caused 2 penetrating wounds to her torso and caused a liver injury. So we're going to do a more in-depth analysis of the medical report on Patreon. We're going to start because YouTube can create kind of a vanilla atmosphere. We don't have to worry about some of this stuff on our Patreon site. So we're going to do that. So if you look for that too. So Celeste died by stabbed by an object that caused 2 penetrating wounds to her torso and caused her a liver injury. Toxicology found she was presumptive positive for benzodiazepines and methamphetamine or MDMA, which is ecstasy. I have personally spoken to witnesses who told me that David used hard drugs with them. Well, I suppose if you're willing to, a 13-year-old, you're probably willing to give her drugs too, right? So the David preliminary. Okay, now remember all the hubbub. She shows up on the scene. He's innocent and blah blah fucking blah. Did I look like Chris Farley there for a second? The David preliminary hearing has been continued until May 1st. Oh, I guess we need to have some time to look at the material. I guess we just didn't look at it yet. Matters of procedural importance were discussed today, mostly about transferring discovery from the DA office to the defense. Now, this is how I know Blair Berk ain't going to hang out of this case. Number one, I don't think they have enough money for her. Number two, I don't think she has the stomach for the rest of this case, to be honest with you. Items of interest that came up include David's devices that came to a significant amount of corn on the cob of a child variety, if you know what I mean. We can't say the word, I guess, according to my editors. We can't say images that are inappropriate taken of which requires special handling. When you're viewing this material of an inappropriate nature dealing with, okay, you know what I'm talking about, right? I can't say the fucking word here, but on my YouTube or Patreon I can. When you're dealing with that material as a lawyer, you can't have that material in your possession. It's illegal, even if it's part of a case. So Blair Berk, if she's going to be the lawyer, which I don't think she's going to be, but if she's going to be the lawyer, in order for her to see what's on David's devices, all this inappropriate crap that he has on there, which if you have 40 terabytes of information, get ready for some. You better get your box wine, Blair, and you better get your big, huge bowl of popcorn and go on over to the district attorney's office and prepare more than one afternoon to view this voluminous amount of BS that he has on his devices, because you can't possess it in your office. So you have to go to the government's offices in order to view that material. That's what they mean by it requires special handling. Also, there's a large amount of data from a wiretap, which that's why you don't say things like, he's 100% not guilty. Do you believe that OJ's guilty? I believe OJ's guilty. But he said that in open court, and guess what? He was found not guilty. But that happened to work out for those guys. It ain't going to work out for David. I mean, you're starting out in a huge hole. First of all, you got a song called Romantic Homicide, which is just as dark can be, looking into the inner workings of your soul. And then you've got this lovely, young girl who is probably idolized him, missing the finger that had his name tattooed on it, missing an eye, missing, dismembered body in bags in his Tesla. You're starting out in front of the bus, and the bus is coming at you 100 miles an hour. Also, there's a large amount of data from the wiretap. So wiretap, that's going to be interesting to figure out what the hell that stuff says. So, one of the things that a government can do is be patient. I had a case where my client was involved in a drug conspiracy, right? And he just went and collected a bunch of money. It was so dumb because he went to go collect drug money so he could pay me on a DUI. What did I tell you? Don't commit a felony to avoid a misdemeanor, right? But they waited 4.5 years before they charged him and 26 other people. In that time, he got sober. He had 2 children. He started a business. He was a completely different guy 4.5 years later. So my point is, though, is that the government can be patient. And that's why they didn't charge us out right away, because they were investigating. And if they had wiretaps, guess what they probably have? Well, what are we going to do with her body? I'm not saying that they have that. But here's the other flip side of this coin. What about his managers? When this happened in 2025, he was having a fucking release party. And I don't want anybody fucking up my release party because she's threatening to go to the cops. If anybody had motive, they don't have to prove motive, but if it does help because it explains the context. If anybody had motive, David had motive because he's a minor and she's going to go tell. And if she tells, guess what? He goes to prison. Well, gee, you might as well commit a capital offense then. Jesus Christ. There's a large amount. And then search warrants will be unsealed. So one of the things about a search warrant, why it's important to have it unsealed, is the search warrant, in order to get a search warrant, you have to have an affidavit. And that affidavit is the application to the court. So they file that later. But in a lot of these high profile and complex cases, or cases where witnesses are to be protected, they put them under seal, and so if they put them under seal, you can't get access to them. Once we get access to those affidavits of the search warrants, we're going to have more detail of who's talking, what they're talking about, what their probable cause is to search these devices. And according to Mr. Fisher, David did not look confident in court today, in my opinion. Well, gee, when you're fucked, you don't walk in, hey, I'm having a good old time knowing I'm never going to get out of this jumpsuit. He was in an orange jumpsuit and he just stared forward. Well, good for him. A couple of other items of interest from Mr. Fisher. Let's see, the David hearing this morning. So the assistant district attorney affirmed that there were 3 separate investigative grand juries. These are not charging juries. In November, December, and February, she also stated that the defense would need to provide a 10 terabyte hard drive for David's iCloud account alone. It's just his iCloud account. Additionally, search warrants were served on phones, tablets, and other devices at the time of David's arrest. It's going to take, an underling, because they're not going to go through this, an inordinate amount of time to go through this stuff. Early in the case, I released information about an email that had been sent to David's manager. This is, again, Mr. Fisher. And the reason I'm going with Mr. Fisher is because he's been accurate on some things, and he was there in court, and he's kind of following this. So he's helpful to us. So in February 2024, early in the case, Fisher released information about an email that was been sent to David's manager, Josh Marshall, and another person, notifying them that Celeste Rivas Hernandez was a missing person. Josh publicly denied this in his TikTok comments. You know, why these guys are doing this on fucking social media is beyond me, claiming it wasn't true. However, an alleged copy of that email was leaked tonight on Reddit. The screenshot circulating online is said to be one that Josh took himself, sent to David, who then forwarded to one of Celeste's friends. And there will be more that proves that this was a known relationship between an adult and child. And then she wound up going home right after that email. There's been, look at it. So here's the email. There's been talk that the artist David possibly has something to do with the disappearance of 13-year-old Celeste Rivas. If that statement holds any merit, please do the right thing and take her home. Her parents are worried. So the management receives an email stating that David is connected to the missing minor, right? The email was sent directly to David, and one day afterwards, she goes home. Gee, big surprise there. Here's the problem. As a lawyer, not everything we do is privileged, okay? If I know that my client has some evidence of a crime, and I take that evidence and I hide it somewhere because I don't want it to hurt him, I'm now guilty of a crime. Period. If his management company is, orchestrating things and knows about certain things and is aiding and abetting certain things, they're on the hook too. So if he's having an album release party and they know about the goings on and they're helping him get out of town and they're doing other things to help him after the fact, that's aiding and abetting after the fact. And you're guilty of, usually the guidelines are about half of what the substantive guidelines are. So if you're looking at life, you'd probably be looking at 150 months or something like that, honestly. On April 24th, 2025, this is again from Mr. Fisher, just hours after the prosecutors alleged that David killed Celeste, his management held a withered album release party in Los Angeles that began at 8 p.m. David then took the red-eye flight to New York afterwards. So all of his managers were likely in Los Angeles for the party. The house that Celeste was in was lured to, according to the prosecutors, was leased by his management company. So the question is, who knew what and when did they know it? When you have wiretaps in this kind of thing, they may have wiretaps on his management company. And if they have communications between David and his management company showing that they knew what was going on with Celeste and they helped him after the fact, one of two things could happen here. They could become snitches, and that might be why they're not charged. Or they could, they might not have the goods on them. That's probably one of those two. But if they're snitches, they're reaping the benefits of this album release party and concealing everything and probably fucking over David while he's sitting in jail. Wrap your head around that one. April 23 and 24 were not quiet, uneventful days or nights. David had just performed at Coachella. His album was being released and the party was held in his honor. There were people around him and he was the center of attention. It is difficult to believe he had much time completely alone. Who knew what and when? Now, Blair Berk said, he did not kill this person. Okay. But he's got a lot of child corn on the cob. So even, let's say he walks on the murder case. He's got all these inappropriate images on his computer that will put him away for just as long. It was argued, how long do you go away for on these kinds of child images cases? And one video clip is worth 75 images. If you have 600 images in federal court, it's a 15-year mandatory minimum, and the judge can't do anything about it. There's no discretion to depart. And in state court, and you got 40 terabytes of shit, here's the thing. If you're a depraved motherfucker, you are going to have a ton of stuff. And, when you're a privileged, depraved motherfucker like David is, you don't care, because you got people handling this and that. So you're just doing your thing and you're doing your thing and you keep doing your thing. Maybe you can beat that murder case. Maybe you can't. But you won't be able to beat the stuff that's on your computer after you got done beating your meat. I mean, you just can't. So All right, let's talk a little bit more about the procedure. Okay, Judge Olmedo is taking the bull by the horns here, and she's establishing the rules, the courtroom rules. No more than 2 attorneys at prosecution and defense tables. So, Blair, you're it. This case is in death penalty posture until the people make a decision on the penalty phase, which means 2 attorneys argue for the defense. She said the reporters can use laptops, but not phones. There's absolutely no live transmission from the courtroom, so we don't have cameras in the courtroom. There are no Google Glasses. There are no tweeting. If you want to write something and send it out, then you need to go into the hallway to do that. The judge said she was unsure if today was to be the actual prelim or just schedule one. Well, they rescheduled to May 1st. The defense attorney, Marilyn Bednarski, not Blair Berk, like I said they want one within 10 days, but need discovery to do a meaningful prelim. They don't need the full discovery, but they need the basics. The prosecutors said in court that 3 grand juries convened in David's case not to return an indictment, but to investigate. She didn't say exactly what they considered, but she said 1 grand jury convened in November and another in December, another one in February. So in order to get those transcripts, the court has to order them. The prosecutor can't just release them. Judge Olmedo also said she understands the defense predicament of wanting a speedy trial and needing discovery when there's a lot of it. I've even had some attorneys explain to me it's a Hobson's choice, but it's still a choice they have to make. Here's the thing. A speedy trial, I mean, you know, I'm not sure what it is in California. In Minnesota, after your second hearing, you have the right to have a speedy trial, and it's within 60 days. It never helps the defense to have a speedy trial. The only reason they're talking about a speedy trial is because their client is in custody and he's probably squawking about it. But you've got 40 terabytes of information and you want a speedy trial. This is the rest of your life. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon. So why don't you just put your feet up, get your bologna sandwich, and start singing your prison blues, because this is not going to go well for you. All right. So, are you still with me? Are you still with me? Okay. So, note from Robert. This is Robert. Robert thinks he knows everything, and he knows a lot. And he tells me all the time how great I am, and I don't believe him. Almost every creator has reviewed the autopsy, so let's not do a deep dive. So we're gonna do a little deep dive on the autopsy, but we're gonna put that on our Patreon site. So you can kind of go there if you're one of our Patreon members. And we're going to do that because I want to go into detail about the case a little bit more in depth. And I can't say some of the words here that I can say over there. So we'll talk about that later. But here's some of the takeaways. There are 2 penetrating injuries to the torso, the right abdomen with injury to her liver, and the left chest with penetrating of underlying intercostal space and cortical disruption of adjacent ribs. Suffice to say, she was stabbed in the chest and on both sides. That is a homicide, period. It's not natural causes. Bilateral dismemberment of upper and lower extremities. Multiple additional skin defects, in other words, probably beating. Her remains were 71 pounds. This doesn't reflect her weight at death, but shows how long she was in the trunk and basically how much her water weight she lost at the time. She was missing an eyeball, as well as 2 fingers that were missing. This may be significant. One of those fingers had the tattoo of David on it. She had wounds to her hands, which could be defensive wounds, which probably were, as you can see here. According to the police, her body was found in a black trash bag and black body bag. Her upper and lower extremities showed a full thickness dismemberment with relatively flat cut surfaces through it. I mean, somebody went to some effort to not only dismember this lady, or not only to kill her, but to dismember her and to dispose of her body. Multiple fragments of blue plastic material are found embedded in the cut surfaces. Representative fragments are collected by the medical examiner. And according to the criminal complaint, the dismemberment happened on around May 5th. How do they know that? They know that. They don't put stuff in a complaint that they don't know for sure, generally. This is 2 weeks after the complaint alleges that Celeste was killed. The question is, where was her body stored? The blue plastic found embedded in the cuts offer an answer. If she was stored in a blue tarp or blue bag and the cuts were made, then there could have been evidence outlinking him to the crime. All right, back on May 5th, it's hard to know exactly where the dismemberment happened based upon the evidence alone, based on the presence of hemorrhage in the areas where the cut, or one could easily determine when dismemberment occurred on a fresher body. I mean, there is a problem with this case in the sense that the decomposition has a negative effect on the value of the forensic information. But they still got the dismemberment. They still have the cause of death and the manner of death. They still have all that. So we have the forensic toxicology report, which shows the MDMA in her system. And you've got you have a treasure trove of evidence in this case. And you're going to have, everybody's got a digital footprint. May 5th, they're going to know exactly where everybody was when. And they're going to know pretty much where her body was at that time, right? Because they didn't take that car into the impound lot. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get information from that Tesla. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. So there's just an absolute treasure trove of information. So, and it's not just, David that's involved. You have other people that were involved too. A friend of David's by the name of Neo, who testified before the grand jury. Supposedly, Mr. Fisher has seen a video with him moving the car. What did he know and when did he know it? And then there's also all this swabs that they did. They did swabs of the bag and, whose DNA is going to be on there. So when you look at this, and one of the reasons why this could have taken so long is because, number one, they convened a grand jury, investigated grand jury. Number two, they got DNA. And I know you don't get those DNA results. Like, it's not like you just put them into a computer and you get them right now. It takes sometimes weeks or even, 6 to 8 weeks sometimes to get DNA. And a lot of times you can't get them until you're set for trial. I know our agency here in Minnesota called the BCA, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, they are swamped. And so you don't get those DNA results right away. And that's one of the reasons why you could have had this done. But if David's DNA is on the body bag or on this tarp or, anywhere on her, anywhere, that's a problem for David. So you've got body-worn video, DNA trace evidence. So what that means, there's a difference between touch DNA and DNA from some source. Okay, so for example, this lovely Stop Self-Snitching koozie that you can get on clrbrucerivers.com. If you have this, is my DNA on there? Yeah, what does that mean? That means at some point I probably touched this, right? As opposed to is, my fluid or blood somewhere. That's different than touch DNA. And so a story can be told by who touched what and when. If there's touch DNA on any part of these bags or anything that come directly from David, it's going to be an issue for him. Huge issue. But this is another case where it could be like the Casey Anthony case. They have to link everything up. It's not just enough that she's found where she's found. He has to be responsible for it, and they have to connect all the dots. So Celeste was okay. Let's just kind of go through some of the family stuff, I guess. Celeste was missing for 1.5 years, and people are calling for an investigation into her family. And some people want them criminally charged. Here is Steven Fisher speaking to streamer Gideon about the case.
Missing, you want to know, in my opinion, what the missing persons report was about? It was to cover their ass so CPS didn't come in and say, "Hey, she's not going to school. What's up?" If she's a missing person, you say she's not going to the school because she's a missing person. Then you don't have CPS in your life at that moment. And I sympathize. I guarantee. I know that they are. I know that they're grieving. I know they lost a daughter, but goddamn, if She shouldn't have been allowed to be. She was gone a year and a half, man. A year and a half. Like somebody should have said, maybe we shouldn't be letting Celeste live her own life. There needs to be account.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the parents probably weren't letting her live her own life, that they couldn't control her daughter. That's my guess. You think she has that tattoo of David on her finger with her parents' permission? I don't think so. Unless David's paying the parents, and they're taken by money and fame.
There needs to be accountability.
Well, I went with the charge. Could you see potential charges being pressed on the parents? Or do you think that for press reasons and...
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I think it's too high profile of a case, right? So they're going to say, oh, shit, if we do that, we're going to have a certain amount of the people that are going to be like, I don't care if what they did is wrong. You got to give them some space because they're a grieving family. And they are. But they've also got to be like, hey, we messed up. We messed up. And listen, there is, I think there's going to be financial transactions that come out in this that if this goes to trial, they're going to show that there were people that were getting money and it's going to look really, really bad.
And I don't know if he's saying that people are getting money based on something he knows or if he's just speculating on that. And that's one of the things that me and everybody else do. We speculate on things. My speculation, however, is not really speculation. It's learned judgment based upon prior criminal cases I've had. Parents are not going to get charged in this case. My guess in looking at how these parents were handling this situation, is that they didn't have control of their daughter. David did. And he probably filled her head so full of shit about her own parents. They don't love you. I love you. You're mine. Put my name on your finger because I love you and you're mine and we're going to be together forever. What a bunch of bullshit, just an absolute bunch of bullshit. So, and the cousin knew that Celeste was missing. Apparently that she and Celeste had gone to one of the concerts where David was opening for another act. And some Build-A-Bear was found in David's house that had the name of her cousin on it. So she was at the house. So there's a whole host of things that are at play here. And at the end of the day, this business about the parents, about the cousin, and who knew what when, it doesn't amount to them participating in a homicide with David. David had her under his care. David did not care for her. And she had everything to lose here. He probably told her that she wasn't that special and that she was, and that she wasn't getting what she wanted. So she was going to expose him. I think that's it's as simple as that. And, that wasn't going to happen. So he eliminated her. That's really what it comes down to. And then the cover-up happens afterwards. And whether it's his management company part of that, we don't know yet. This is all going to unfold here shortly. And May 1st is the preliminary hearing. Now, keep in mind, the preliminary hearing is just a perfunctory function of the DA, where all they have to do is present probable cause that a murder was committed and that David committed it. That's all they have to show. And my guess is that, and they're not going to display all their evidence at that. It's not a whole trial that would last 6 weeks. It's just a day hearing. But my guess is that once they have that preliminary hearing, bye-bye Berk. Bye-bye Blair Berk. Blair Berk is not going to take this case on. That's just my guess. Maybe not. Maybe he's 100% innocent. And maybe David is not this person who would commit a romantic homicide, even though he talks about it in such a dark fashion. Maybe not. Innocent until proven guilty. That's in court, not here. Come on, Occam's razor. 1 + 1 is 2. But let's keep an open mind. Just because you're just because you like child corn on the cob doesn't mean that that you're a bad guy, does it? Kind of does, actually. Okay, so that's our update on David and all the crap that he's got going on. You talk about if this was a juggler, he'd have 40 terabytes of balls trying to keep in the fucking air. Not a chance. So we'll see you next time here at Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, go to CLRBruceRivers.com. Nick is out of his cardboard box. He's out of his car, and now he's in a rat-infested hole. So let's try to get him out of his rat-infested hole. See you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, police is at my